Dr. Brooke Miller is an MD, a carnivore advocate, and the former Cattlemen's Association president. So he brings together a lot of topics that we discuss on the Sowing Prosperity podcast, and I really enjoyed this conversation. I love the wide range of things that you are involved with, and it just fits so beautifully into what we do. So as a medical doctor, as a farmer yourself, and an advocate, I just think that you have got such a unique perspective, especially when you have an emphasis on the carnivore diet. So if you don't care, tell me like who you are. Make sure that we cover just a little bit of those basics and how you got to where you are now.
Well, yeah, you hit on a couple topics there that I guess I am pretty unique. I'm a small town boy. I was raised in rural Virginia, a small town called Washington, Virginia, population 200, no stoplights, no fast food joints, no big grocery stores. We have to drive about 20 miles to shop for groceries and whatnot. So we're 20 miles from anywhere, and that creates a lot of advantages, but it also creates some disadvantages. You have to put some mileage on your car. But I've always grown up just in love with agriculture. My earliest memories are, we had an old McDonald's farm. We had milk cow, we had pigs, we had sheep, we had cattle, we had chickens, and at one point in time we had some turkeys. None of this big, huge, turkey houses or chicken houses. This was like a farm, a barnyard yard. And I just loved animals. And my dad and my granddad had a big impression on my life. And I would remember going out into the pasture fields with my father at night, looking at cattle and checking cattle. And, those are some of my earliest memories. And my dad was a farmer, and he knew that you couldn't make, a pretty good living if you want to raise a family and give them a pretty good level of life. And so I was in the pasture field one day, and he said, "Son," he goes, "what do you want to do when you get older?" And I said, "Dad, I want to ranch. I want to raise cattle." And he looked at me in all seriousness. He said, "Well, you better find a damn good job." And, I took him, he was my hero. And I took that to heart. I tried to please him. And he always wanted me to be a medical doctor. So that's what I am. And everybody asks me nowadays, he goes, "Well, when did you decide you wanted to be a doctor?" And I said, after I had practiced for about 10 years. That's sort of funny. But now, it's equally my passion. I'm so glad I did it. But I remember the medical school interview, and that question came up, and I didn't know how to answer it, but I somehow answered it. I met a friend of mine my first year in college at Virginia Tech, and he was pre-med, and so he sort of got me more interested in it. But that's how I became a doctor. My doctor friends all want to know, how in the world did you end up raising cattle? It's like, well, I was born into that. And then my ranching friends say, how in the world did you ever become a doctor? So that's the story. It was to please my dad, basically, is what it was. And I'm really glad I did it, because it is an equal passion to raising cattle for me now, very much so. Taking care of people. I've figured out that it's better to give than to receive.
I think there's a lot to be said for that. So let's talk about something that you or some things that you've learned throughout your practice and how you have gone from if we were a part of that mainstream narrative that meat caused all these issues, cancer, heart disease, on and on. What made you question that? How did you come to the point to where you even made a shift?
Well, my dad didn't tell me to be an independent thinker, but I used to watch him, and he was an independent thinker. He would definitely was not afraid to go against the narrative, or go against the mainstream, and so I saw that, and I admired that. But also, I remember, there's certain things in your life. I remember the very first day of medical school, anatomy professor got up and he was speaking to the class, and he said, half of everything that we teach you in medical school will later be proven wrong. We just don't know which half. And here we were, a bunch of young, aspiring doctors, and we thought, and I thought, we were going to learn the meaning of life and learn everything. And I was like flabbergasted that that he said that. And actually I didn't believe him. But as time went on, I remembered that, and I use that in all walks of life. Try to continue to learn, continuously reevaluate what is considered dogma, and just came to this conclusion that things aren't always as they seem. There are a lot of people that have other agendas other than the health and well-being of society, and unfortunately, they've sort of gotten a dominant hold on things in this country and in the world.
Yeah, I think that's obvious, especially after the last few years. But I think that there's a lot of hope. I think there's a lot of hope for conversations like this, conversations that a lot of other people are doing, that we can get to those solutions. So, as far as just including more meat yourself, where are you on that, and where's kind of the maybe pushback you see from some of your patients on consuming more meat?
Well, during my lifetime, I grew up, graduated from high school in 1978, and then went to college and graduated from there in 82, and went on to medical school. At that point in time, there was a theory that animal meat was bad and fat caused heart disease. And I think Harry Truman had just had a heart attack not long before that, and there was a scientist named Ansel Keys who had a theory. Are you familiar with Ansel Keys?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so you know what he did. He did the 7-country study, but it started out as 23 countries, and he pretty much cherry picked his data, and from that were born out the dietary guidelines. And I just remember looking at people today and looking at people in 1978 when I graduated from high school. They looked completely different. Everybody was lean and thin, and we had a very minimal amount of chronic disease. There was no such thing as autism, ADHD. None of that even existed. So I got to thinking, what caused all this? And the dietary guidelines basically were based on junk science. And so I just started looking for other information and ran across, other people with other ideas. I guess you know who Sean Baker is, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
He's probably been the biggest influence on me as far as I went to a whole food diet before I met Sean, but he's been the biggest influence on me as far as the benefits and the health and wellness that can be attained through carnivore. So I met him at the United States Cattlemen's Association meeting in Billings, Montana. I forget what year it was, probably 7, 8, 9 years ago. And he started talking to me about a carnivore diet, and he was talking about the carnivore diet and all the things that it could do. And so I took that to heart, and first I did it with myself, and I got off blood pressure medicine. I was a little bit overweight, not tremendously overweight. I was probably metabolic syndrome, and I was on antihypertensive medication, and I was hurting all over, and my triglycerides were high, my HDL cholesterol was low, and so I was probably pre-diabetic, even though my blood sugars weren't elevated. And my wife and I went on a strict carnivore diet, and I remember about 2 months after I went on the carnivore diet, I was outside cleaning up the garden and bent over to pick some weeds, and then stood back up, and I got dizzy and lightheaded, and went inside and I said, "Hey, baby, check my blood pressure." She's a nurse, and so she checked my blood pressure, and it was low. So I stopped antihypertensive medicine right then, and my blood pressure has been great ever since. And my triglycerides plummeted from like 250, 300 down to about 70, and my HDL cholesterol went from 35 to 65, or no, 76. So I saw the tremendous benefits in it with me. Plus, the other things that I saw is I no longer had gas, acid reflux. Mental clarity is the thing that is probably the most notable. When I was a kid, your mind goes just like that, just fast, 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 fast. And a lot of that came back with the carnivore diet. Joint pain improved, sleep improved, mood really improved. So much less anxiety. Everybody has a little bit of anxiety, and much less anxiety. So I started employing that in my practice and telling my patients what I had experienced and what other physicians were seeing with reversal of chronic disease. And for those that really take it to heart and take their own health seriously and take responsibility for their own health, they seem motivated to do it. And we've gotten quite a few type 2 diabetics off medication, people with inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis. Their symptoms completely go away when they go on a carnivore diet, the ones that we have gotten to do it. Now they'll come back if they go off the diet. But it's I find it's a great way to restore people's health and get them off medication, because a lot of times medications are just symptom control. There are a lot of good medications out there, but some are just symptom control. Sure. So it's been a great thing for me as far as my practice go, and I started attracting a lot of people who have been to doctors, and the doctors really don't spend a lot of time with them, and they give them a medication, put them on a statin, put them on a blood pressure medicine, and don't talk to them about how they can reverse their chronic disease and be healthier and be happier. So we attract a lot of patients like that in our practice. Even though we are in a very small rural area, we get a lot of people from, several hours away. And with telehealth, that makes it even easier. I mean, I treat people all over the country, though, quite honestly.
That's awesome. It's awesome. It took me a while. I honestly, it was a friend of mine who found out that it was Gulf War syndrome is actually what he was, having issues from. And every time he ate, he's basically bleeding. And so he went on a carnivore diet for a while, and then the bleeding stopped. And so I was like, man, it just doesn't, sound right. And so as I just dove into it, it opened me up to this whole world. And then another friend, Lisa Fisher, was doing it. She's like, you got to try it. So I tried a 2-week experiment with it, and I felt the best I ever have. So, Dr. Miller, I want to see if you've got any of the cancer meat, a cancer patient on a carnivore diet. Do you have any experience or know of any stories along those lines of somebody utilizing carnivore with cancer?
Well, my brother had cancer, and I'm trying to get him on a carnivore diet, but at least I didn't get him on a carnivore diet, but I got him on a whole food diet, hopefully to avoid processed food and sweets and things like that. But no, we have not gotten anybody solely on a carnivore diet that was a cancer patient. I sure would like to, because cancer feeds off of sugar. Mm-hmm. and high insulin levels cause inflammation, and that's not good. But yeah, cancer is very metabolically active and needs a lot of glucose and sugar, and you can pretty much help starve the cancer by going on a no sugar, no carbohydrate diet.
I mean, that seems to be what all the evidence is showing. I did have Dr. Nasha Winters on recently, and she had a beautiful take on all of that with the diet, and it's she has some nuances there that I think were incredible. But when you talk to say Laszlo Boros, and we're looking at like the deuterium aspect, the carnivore diet, if the deuterium component is right, I mean, it supports it tremendously. His big thing is that if we're going to eat meat, though, it needs to be grass fed and grass finished. So what is your take as a doctor and a cattleman on sourcing meat? What is the best way for the average person to source meat?
Um, Find a rancher.
Find a rancher.
Find the producer. Find a producer, and you have a grocery store, so if you source meat and you source it from places that you feel are outstanding sources, then that would be a great thing for people. That would be a great service to you bring in the meat from ranchers. I think this is going to happen organically. We've got to bypass the big industrial ag complex that is so corrupt, that is basically ruining the economy of rural America.
Absolutely.
And when you rule the economy of rural America, then you create all these other kinds of problems. The big problem with drug and alcohol addiction in rural America is really real, and a lot of that is economic, because there are a lot of jobs and a lot of opportunity. But finding a rancher and sourcing your food locally or directly from the source, and avoiding this big ag commodity means of getting it, because you really don't know how the animals have been raised and what they've been fed and what they've been exposed to. If you don't do that, you can't even. I mean, until recently, the product of the USA label didn't mean anything, and still doesn't mean anything until they implement it. But USDA did pass a final rule last month, or maybe earlier this month, that said in order for an animal to be or carry the product of the USA label, it had to be born, raised, and slaughtered and processed in the United States of America. And prior to that, it wasn't that way. We were getting meat, and they could, basically repackage it, slice it, whatever, and put a product of the USA label on. So it's very deceptive. But there's still a lot of deceptive practices going on. Yeah. You mentioned something a moment ago. One of your previous guests said that the beef needed to be grass-fed. I disagree with that. I mean, I think grass-fed beef is fine. But I think the grass-fed movement came from the fact that, going all the way back to Ansel Keys, that fat is bad. Grass-fed is usually leaner. And grain-fed beef is usually a lot fatter, have a lot more marbling in it, and has a different taste, which I actually prefer. Mm-hmm. But fat it's a very much a necessary in our diet. We have, to make certain, to utilize certain fat-soluble vitamins and things like that. And our brain pretty much is a fatty organ, and it lives off fatty acids. And I think a diet that's low in fat is not very healthy.
Yeah, no, and that was going to be my follow up, because you've got a super unique perspective, being in the beef industry, and more of a legislative political force when it comes to that with the association and stuff. So I'm really on the fence, and I can understand some of the arguments. So like when we talk with like Laszlo or Stephanie Seneff, kind of the big thing around that is what they eat, and so what we eat matters, and I think there's a lot of nuance there. But say Stefan Van Vliet is a PhD metabolomics researcher out of Utah State, and he has dove into the metabolite side of it, and he showed that like some of these broad, diverse regenerative farms have the antioxidant capacity that's like off the charts. It's just like night and day versus a monocrop fed animal. So I mean, I can see both sides. Glyphosate being a big issue. I don't know if you've seen Dr. Seneff's theory on one of the ways that it's so problematic is that the glyphosate's displacing glycine in proteins and it's bioaccumulating. I've also seen some opinions on ruminants are able to get rid of glyphosate and it doesn't bioaccumulate. I don't know if I believe that, but if it is bioaccumulating, I mean, in us or in what we eat, I think that that's a massive issue that we need to better understand. So my point of going through all of that, I think that there's probably some nuance there, Dr. Miller, on if we're feeding them GMO corn and soy versus an organic option or an option that is not having these dicamba, glyphosate, all the other things. That I think that is definitely something to pay attention to. And I do carry both.
I agree.
I carry both. I do grass-fed, grass-finished, but we've also got an Amish group up northern Arkansas, southern Missouri that does organic corn and soy, and that is the beef that we carry. So just want to throw that out there and get your opinion.
Well, I agree with everything you've said. I mean, glyphosate is a big problem. Not only did we spray it on the ground, but we spray it on the crop prior to not me, but we as a nation are allowed to spray it on the ground, but also spray it onto the grain crop. Not corn, but the grain crop to dry it down prior to harvest, and that's just ludicrous. That just proves that our regulatory agencies are completely captured by the people that they regulate. And that's just another example. I mean, there's so many examples of our regulatory agencies being completely captured and in a lot of cases corrupt. But I agree. I mean, you don't want to consume something that's going to potentially harm you. And but the grain-fed issue is obviously if it's organic, it takes away any of that problem as far as chemicals and things like that. It's sort of tough to find any grain now, unless it is completely organic, to feed cattle that hasn't been raised in a traditional monocropping manner like you talk. But those are some concerns of mine, but I don't have great concerns about the meat being tainted with glyphosate, and maybe it is. I don't know. Do you have any studies on that?
Yeah, I'll get you some stuff because what Dr. Seneff is saying. So Stephanie Seneff, I don't know if you're familiar with her. Her book Toxic Legacy, relatively new, is absolutely incredible. I mean, she's phenomenal, and she breaks it down pretty good in there on supporting what she's talking about. But
what's the name of her book?
Toxic Legacy.
Okay.
And she's been on the podcast a couple times. I got another one coming out where her and Dr. Boros just published a new study that revolves around deuterium, and we go into glyphosate again. But
I think it should be outlawed. I think glyphosate should be outlawed. I don't know why in the world we're using it.
And
it's ridiculous. There are a lot of the things a lot of the things that we use should be outlawed.
Absolutely. So, what is your take on like what Gabe Brown and Alan Williams are doing with the Regenified. How important is that? Is that something that we should get more behind with the certification on trying to do um, combat the greenwashing that's going on? I feel like that's really what they're doing is kind of meet the farmer where they are to get away from the greenwashing to circumvent it. But what's your take on that?
Alan Williams
Yeah, Dr. Williams.
from Mississippi.
Yeah,
Yeah, from Mississippi. I know he's big into grass fed and regenerative, and I mean, I'm all for regenerative farming and agriculture. We're trying to get away from uh, fertilizers, and we're doing a pretty good job. We're starting to, we have been spraying algae to improve the soil health on our land. From Enlightened Soil and Better Fed Foods, they both have products that we use.
cool.
We're feeding our bulls an omega-3 supplement made from algae that Better Fed Foods is supplying us, and the animals seem to stay healthier. And there are all kinds of things that we're noticing with it. They're healthier. Their gains are better. Their fertility is better, and we're trying to do away with a lot of the things that traditional farmers do. But I don't know about certification processes. I'm a little bit anti-certification processes, but I guess we got to do something. But I'm more of a free market, free guy.
Sure.
And if consumers are buying directly from farmers and ranchers, they can have a conversation with the farmer and rancher, and I would hope that they wouldn't lie to them. But I guess the farmer and rancher could lie to the guy that's doing the certification process if he wanted to. But most farmers and ranchers that I know really care about their animals. They care about their product. They care about the soil. They care about their community, and I think they're going to do a lot of things to improve all that, not to desecrate it.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't know if I answered your question or not, but
Well,
I think Alan Williams does some great work.
yeah, and I think what they're doing with that is it's more to kind of get away from what organic has became. Just a bastardized attempt at something that started out, I think, with good intentions, and then it's just been turned into what it is. But I think we have to have some sort of a solution for clarity, and maybe you're spot on. It's as simple as we just go directly to the farmers. I just think that has been a challenging component for a lot of people in the metropolitan areas without the retail avenue, the partnerships of like what I do with working with these farmers directly. And so I think we're up to like 6 different growers, and that we have everything from water buffalo, emu, multiple types of beef, grass fed, grass finished, and then the organic wagyu. So it's a lot of different farmers, and everything's Arkansas raised, with the exception of the wagyu, and that's southern Missouri. But the marketing and the retail side of it honestly, it's a super big challenge, because I mean, we're up against, say, Tyson, right? I'm in Arkansas. It's home of Tyson and Walmart.
Yeah.
So like we have an agrarian state that's ran by corporations. And I've seen what's happened to rural America. You hit on that earlier. On the Delta is drying up and dying. It's horrible, and they don't care about the land. I can guarantee you that, because you look at it and all it is dirt or whatever commodity crops there. And so, Dr. Miller, something we did is we went down and filmed a documentary with Will Harris at White Oak Pastures, and saw kind of the system that he's implementing. And he's focused, his daughter, Jenny, they've been really focused on the marketing and retail side of it. So how do you, being involved with the association and everything, feel we can overcome on the marketing and the retail side of it?
I think it's going to be a gradual process, and it has to be done organically. Just people, just entrepreneurs, just like you. That's it's not going to be something government driven. It's got to be consumer driven. It's got to be education driven. As a physician and the past president of the United States Cattlemen's Association, you know, I have a lot of people contact me that are not ranchers and not farmers that want to know these issues. They want to know the safety. Is their beef safe? Is their food supply safe? And I think the pandemic, turned the Great Reset into the Great Awakening.
I hope so.
And people are really, they realize now that their beef doesn't come from Walmart and Costco and Giant Foods. It comes from people. And they saw, grocery store shelves empty, and then they saw their food prices skyrocket, and direct to consumer marketing is exploding. And now I'm seeing businesses all over that basically, a lot of people have contacted me. I just got contacted the other day by someone who saw me on Marty Bent's podcast, TFTC. I think it was Colorado Craft Beef or something like that. And, they sound like they have a great thing going as far as direct marketing to consumers. And they have, they slaughter about, I think, 1,500 head a month.
Wow.
Which is a pretty sizable operation. But I think this is going to happen. We just have to let it happen. We have to promote it, but we have to let it happen and let American ingenuity take over. Now, the big thing is most of the cattle are in, west of the Mississippi, Midwest and Western states. And a large part of the population is on each coast. Yeah. Now, there are a lot of cattle in California, but New York, New England, there are not a lot of cattle up there. So that's going to be, as far as getting those people fed in a healthy manner, will be the biggest lift. But we have to have we have to have more regional packing plants. And I think, people like you that have a grocery store that's doing this, I think that's great. I think that's absolutely fantastic. And you are taking what you are doing seriously, and you're taking the health and wellness of your consumers seriously. And this has got to be a person-to-person transaction where you know somebody and you can look them in the eye, and that they're telling you the truth, that they have your best interest at heart, and they can believe what you're doing. I mean, that happened to me with the pandemic. I mean, getting off track here a little bit, but getting back to medicine, I was working for a large healthcare or moderate-sized healthcare corporation, and this was centralized control of medicine, and they were getting in between the doctor-patient relationship. They were telling me to say things and do things that I didn't want to do, and I would be in the room with my patient, and I wasn't going to tell them something that I didn't believe. Switching gears a little bit, something similar happened with me in the pandemic. Is we had the centralized control of medicine. I was employed by a healthcare corporation, and they were getting in the doctor-patient relationship, and they were trying to tell me, as a physician who has almost 40 years of experience in clinical medicine, what to say to my patients, how to, they were wanting me to push the vaccine and not treat them, not give them anything when they got sick, and then wait for them to get really sick, then put them in the hospital and put them on a ventilator. And I wasn't going to do that. And so, I'd sit there with my patient there in front of me that many of them I've known for 20 years or more. And they'd ask me, they look at me like, what do I do? What do we do? What's the way to go? What's the right way to go? And I wasn't going to tell them something that I didn't believe. And so they realized that I was telling them the truth, and that the centralized control planners were not. And I guess that's one reason why we have such a busy practice. I got fired, by the way, from my I got fired. I was writing vaccine exemptions. I was speaking out against mask mandates, and I didn't tell anybody not to get the vaccine, but they asked me what they would do, and I said, "Well, you do what you want. I'm not getting the vaccine." Um,
Yeah. No,
I guess
and that was
there were
that
some
was
healthy young. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah. That was just such a confusing and terrifying time. So, like for me, my son was undergoing chemo in January of 2020, right as COVID
Yeah.
started coming in at the first of the year and into March. We were terrified. I believed it, right? I believed that the mask thing is what we needed to do. We did not get vaccinated, but in that honestly, it opened my mind. I want to circle back to the vaccine thing because I think that you kind of opened the door for that when Lander was getting the regular vaccine schedule. I think it was the DTaP. He had a reaction to where it completely shut off the bile production in his liver. So his poop was chalk white. And so I was working on the ambulance at the time. So I've 8 years EMS experience. And so start calling my doctor friends, like, what's going on? They're like, you need to take him in. And so took him back to our pediatrician. And then he said this was absolutely a vaccine reaction, turned it into whatever, entity keeps up with that. And so the solution, I kid you not now, was we just won't give them all at the same time. We'll just break them up. And so that was my first inkling that something's just not quite right with all the vaccine topic.
Mm-hmm.
And so I, as the whole push with the COVID situation, it just didn't feel right. So nobody did in my immediate family. But how did that raise your ears, perk your ears, so to speak, to be at a point that you personally weren't going to take it?
Well, it was sort of a gradual type thing. Like everybody else, when it first came out, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know who was at risk, who was going to die, how transmissible it was. And I think I voluntarily wore a mask one day when I went out to a rural co-op, and I said, "This is ridiculous. I'm not going to places that I have to wear a mask." Although I was under a mask mandate at my job, so I had to wear one at my job. But I didn't when I was in the patient room because most of my patients didn't want to wear a mask either.
Yeah.
But it was sort of a gradual thing. I saw how things that they were pushing was pretty absurd. My wife and family, most of our family, caught COVID in end of November around Thanksgiving. My sister-in-law is a flight attendant, and she sort of brought it home to the family, and the whole family caught it. And we did fine. I actually took some hydroxychloroquine at that time because there was evidence to show that hydroxychloroquine was beneficial. And then soon thereafter, I saw Pierre Corey's testimony in the Senate talking about ivermectin. So we started using that. But the thing that really, there were two things that perked my ears. One, anytime people that were having success treating COVID came up with some type of solution, it was always knocked down, and the central planners didn't want to have anything to do with it. They were saying they would come up with a reason. Oh, that's dangerous. Well, we've been prescribing these drugs that they're calling dangerous my entire life, and nobody ever told me they were dangerous, and they weren't. They aren't dangerous. That was one thing, and then the other thing was the natural immunity thing, where they said everybody need the vaccine. Because natural immunity, we didn't know how long it lasts, we didn't know how long vaccinal immunity lasts. We didn't know anything about vaccinal immunity because it was not only a brand new vaccine, but it was a brand new platform. It was experimental, and so that really got the hair standing up on the back of my neck when they started telling me that natural immunity was not a significant thing. And I just started picking apart the narrative. My entire medical career, this is the first disease that we have been told as physicians not to try to treat early. We've always tried to treat things early. And they were just telling you things that just didn't make sense from a medical standpoint. And they were talking about following the science. They were the ones that weren't following the science, but they had this massive propaganda. And I think the one that really tipped it way overboard was when they started wanting to give the vaccine to healthy children.
Yeah.
Healthy children are not affected by this disease, hardly at all.
Why do you think you were one of the few, honestly, one of the very few that questioned it and didn't go along with it?
Getting back to my dad, independent thinker, always trying to think things through, trying to, this didn't sound right. Why would I? And I've never been someone who's gone along with the flow just because it's the easy thing to do. Go along to get along and be liked. I mean, I've always wanted to be liked, obviously, but I'm not going to say something and do something that I don't believe in order to quote be liked, like a lot of people do. And then I've also got a strong faith, and I'm confident in my own abilities and my own thought process, and I never I listen to what experts say, but I never just do what experts say just because experts say it. So it's a lot of things. But I think the big thing is that I'm self-confident in my own abilities and my abilities to think through problems and problem solve. That's what life is about, is problem solving, really.
I think all of that is so much easier when there's not an agenda. That's the big eye opener for me as I've gone into. I don't have an agenda. I simply want to talk to the best people in the world that have done something and figure out how we apply things. Right? Just if
you're exactly right, and that's exactly what I did. I was basically searching for doctors that had success in treating these. This started in China, but it sort of worked its way east, and it was hitting Europe, and we were looking at what the European doctors were doing and what they were having success with. And if they're having success, why not try it? I mean, it's like my friend Richard Urso said in a hearing in the Senate. He goes, when I, as a physician, see something that I've never seen before, I don't know how to treat a certain condition, I ask a doctor who has treated it before. I don't go to the CDC or the FDA and ask them how to treat it. I ask someone who has actually done this before. And we got that all backwards. We absolutely got that backwards. And an untold number of people died needlessly because of it. And the vaccine has turned out to be, which is not really a vaccine, it's gene therapy. It's turned out to be a really a disaster. I was concerned I didn't take the vaccine because I was confident in my own immune system and my own body and my own health and wellness, because we were seeing who was dying and who was getting really sick from it, and I didn't fit that profile. I'm a carnivore. I'm healthy. I work out. And my immune system is good, and it just made sense not to do it for me. And
but as we wrap up, Dr. Miller, I am getting asked a lot about, is our meat mRNA vaccinated, and for the longest, I was like, that's like not even a thing, right? Like we're not doing. No, of course it's not. And so
now yeah.
What is going on?
That's a huge question I get. That's a question. That's probably number one question I get now is mRNA, is the meat been treated with mRNA? And all I can say is that by and large, family farmers, I'm not talking about the big corporate feedlots, but family farmers and ranchers are very much against mRNA. Most of the ones, the ranchers that I know, rejected it, rejected the shot, but they're very much against that. But the FDA and the United States Department of Agriculture, whoever the regulatory agency, has never approved an mRNA vaccine in beef cattle. There's not one approved. There's not one on the market. Okay. There apparently was one on the market in swine. I've been told that they voluntarily withdrawn it from the market. So as of today, I don't think there's any meat in the meat counter that has been treated with mRNA. Now, that being said, the animal health agencies are trying to develop these vaccines. And the United States Cattlemen's Association, in our December 2023 annual meeting, passed a resolution that has since been passed by our membership, basically saying that we are against the use of mRNA in livestock, and basically in all food sources is what we said. And that any research that is being done with this platform in livestock or food needs to be completely transparent. In other words, we need to be able to see the data and see the studies, not take someone's word for it like society did with the mRNA vaccines in human beings, because they lied to us. They lied to us on multiple levels, and they paid off the media and they paid off multiple people, just basically by throwing their wealth around. They didn't say, here's this payment. They said, they hired celebrities. They paid celebrities to push this vaccine. And those people kill people, as far as I'm concerned.
I can't disagree with you, my friend. So, what is next for you? What are you working on, and how can people come find more of, say, the work that you've put out there?
Okay. Well, I don't put out a lot of work, but when I do, I guess I put out some pretty good stuff, hopefully. I have a Substack, Brooke Miller MD at substack.com. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook, both as Brooke Miller MD, but also Ginger Hill Angus has an Instagram and Facebook account. And my website, or I guess our family practice, Miller Family Health and Wellness, has a Facebook site. And you can get in contact us through our Facebook site, or I guess just Google us online. We have a website, but we really haven't ever activated it. We've been so busy that we don't really need a website to advertise. So Miller Family Health and Wellness is my medical practice. I'd be happy to. We treat, not only health and wellness and restoring health and wellness through reversal of chronic disease, but we also treat vaccine injury and long COVID. Vaccine injury is the toughest one, but we do treat that. And we use the carnivore diet, very much part of that treatment process. The carnivore diet stimulates a self-repair mechanism called autophagy, that and fasting. So I have probably as good a results in treating vaccine injury and long COVID as anybody, but there's some great clinicians out there that we follow and that we get information from. Probably the best one that I know of is a guy named Pierre Corey and Paul Merrick, who run the FLCCC.
Yeah.
They probably influenced our practice of medicine more than anybody.
Yeah. No, I love it. No, great guys. Something I do want to get your take. Now, I did get flagged for this already by YouTube. They had to take a class and everything, but I did, as I was prepping for this, heard you talk about SV40, and you are the only one outside of Jack Cruz and Kevin McKiernan that I've heard speak out about it publicly. So, do you care to go into just briefly what that is?
Yeah. Pfizer, when they did their original trials, they amplified the mRNA in a different manner than what they released on the market. And what they were approved for by the FDA was mRNA that was produced in a different manner, but they had to put it in a E. coli to get it mass produced. And when they extracted the mRNA, it is contaminated with this plasmid DNA. And the plasmid DNA contained fragments of a virus called simian virus 40. And that is a known carcinogen. And Kevin McKiernan has also seen where the mRNA and the SV40 can integrate into the human genome. And that's really scary stuff. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why we are seeing such an uptick in cancer in this country. The working class, white collar workers, their cancer rate rise has doubled higher than, all the cancers have gone up since the mandates, but their cancers in that age group and that population or that socioeconomic class has gone up faster than and higher than anybody else because they were under a lot of mandates, and they did it to keep their jobs. And so, yeah, it's a bad deal, and they definitely hid it from the FDA when they applied for their, for their approval of the mRNA vaccine.
Does that not automatically disqualify them from any sort of immunity? Like any fraud, should that not absolutely just nullify it?
Well, I think most common sense people like you and me and most of Americans would say that would qualify them or disqualify them from any immunity. It sure sounds like that, but you've seen what's going on in our government and who, people get by, seem like they get by with a lot that they shouldn't get by. We definitely have a multi-tiered justice system, and it's pretty incredible, and hopefully Americans will wake up to this whole thing and we'll push back, because I think the minority is controlling this country right now, not the majority. But we have to have people that are bold, like you, like Slim, like many of these other people that have been on your podcast. We have that are willing to stick their neck out, and fight for truth and freedom, because a lot of people don't want to call attention to themselves. Well, we may be the first ones that they come after, but they'll be next. It's not gonna. In the long run, there'll be much more consequences by being quiet than there are by speaking out.
Absolutely. I'm just tired of seeing people suffer, my friend. And so I think that nobody else should have to go through what I saw my baby go through. And there's those kind of parallel stories across the board. So I cannot thank you enough for you taking the time to visit with me and share your experience and wisdom. And I look forward to following up.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on the podcast. I really enjoyed speaking with you, and hopefully I gave you and your listeners something of value that they find, informative.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us on Sowing Prosperity. Be sure to follow along across the social media platforms, including YouTube, and be sure to go to sowingprosperity.com.